of Texas, now joined by the governor of Florida, have been transporting would-be migrants to what they consider liberal strongholds. Both governors, conservative Republicans, say they want these states to experience what their residents do by receiving would-be migrants and asylum seekers with little notice or preparation. Right now, we want to focus on a group that was flown to Marthas Vineyard, an island off Cape Cod in Massachusetts, known as a popular vacation spot. As authorities in Massachusetts move the migrants to Joint Base Cape Cod, where 125 National Guard members will be stationed, many have expressed outrage at what they call a cruel stunt. But we're wondering if there is a legal basis for this, so we called Denise Gilman, co-director of the Immigration Clinic at the University of Texas School of Law.
Of course, I had to say something about this. Big news coming out of Martha's Vineyard. Hello, everybody, and thank you for stopping by my channel. I do appreciate you all supporting my work. Please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. Find me over on Rumble and on Twitter. I post videos over there. If you are watching me on Rumble or on Twitter, then you can find me on YouTube. Now let's get into this report from NPR.
Denise Gilman, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Simply put, are states allowed to do this? Congressman Joaquin Castro, whose district includes over half of San Antonio, where the migrants were flown from, tweeted that the Department of Justice needs to investigate Governor Desantis for using fraud and deception to lure people out of state only to abandon them without fulfilling his false promise. Same for Greg Abbott.
Really? Do you have proof that he did that? Do you have proof that he lied to these people? Or did he actually say to them, hey, look, we're going to send you to one of the nicest places in the country where they have lots of money and they can afford to take good care of you? Which is all true. That's all 100% true, not even deceptive a little bit. The people in Martha's Vineyard have so much money they could easily accommodate 50 illegal immigrants. So how is that a false thing? Not only that, but also the federal government has been doing this. They've been shipping people all over the country by bus and by plane. They've been separating families and shipping them all over the country by bus and by plane. At least, DeSantis didn't separate the families because that's the big boogaboo, right? Oh, you separate the family. Oh, you took the kids and you put them in cages. Oh. Yeah, for their own safety. So, I don't know what to tell you. Don't come here illegally and you won't have that problem. Huh. What a concept. You mean going to a place illegally means that you're subjected to poor treatment? Wow. If they had things my way, it'd be a lot worse.
He went on to suggest that this could be considered trafficking. Is there any merit to this?
I think there are very valid concerns about what exactly the legal construct here is. I think raising trafficking is valid. Trafficking is moving somebody without their authority, without their consent, for gain. And here I think you're basically talking about political gain.
Yeah, somehow I don't think that DeSantis or Abbott need to gain anything. I think they've pretty much made their stance perfectly clear and are getting the support that they want because of that stance. Not only that, that's a lame definition of human trafficking. That is a very lame definition of human trafficking. It sounds like kidnapping is what you're describing. Moving somebody against their will sounds like kidnapping to me. I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but that sounds like kidnapping. Trafficking is when you are moving people for, like she said, profit, right? You're moving one person from one place to another for profiting off of that individual, and they're not actually going to profit off of this. And how are they getting financial kickbacks from this? It's actually costing them money because that's millions of dollars they could just put right into their pocket.
In some ways, I'm not even sure that's the very best way to think about this, because that could be private individuals that are engaging in trafficking. And here you're really talking about government action. Both governors have been very clear that they're doing this under state authority, using public funding. And so when that happens, I really think it's almost better to think about it as a question of the government taking somebody into custody without their authority and without any proper justification, probable cause for a criminal offense or the like.
So crossing the border illegally is now not a criminal offense. Yeah, it seems to me that if you're an illegal alien, even crossing a state border is illegal. So they were coming from Texas to Florida is what DeSantis claims. Let's assume that's true. I don't know if it is or not, but that means they would have crossed through several states illegally. Yeah, not a criminal offense. These lawyers, I tell you, these freaking woke lawyers are just so freaking stupid. I don't even know where to begin with them.
And then moving them.
What if, upon further review, people did consent, even if the terms were somewhat vague, even if they did consent, saying, you know what, wherever I'm going is better than where I am now? Does that change the calculus?
I think if there is true informed consent, the calculus is different. I still think we have some significant due process concerns about what is happening. Some sort of misrepresentations that are problematic as to what exactly the situation will be for migrants that cause problems. But I don't think you have the same level of concern regarding deprivation of liberty by the government without proper authorization as you do if there is not consent.
So the flights originated in Texas, and it's a bit unclear of whether the folks we're talking about here who went to Martha's Vineyard, it's unclear whether they even set foot in Florida. So it suggests a coordinated effort. In that case, who would be responsible or accountable for this, depending on your point of view? Does this, and part of the reason I ask is, does that not sort of suggest some federal issue here? Because you're talking about people crossing state lines.
The illegal immigrants are responsible. They chose to come here illegally. They are adults, most of them. They are responsible for their behaviors. And they should be held responsible for the behaviors they foist onto their children who are not legal adults. Not our politicians in this case. Well, you could go to the federal politicians and say, oh, it's Joe Biden who's responsible for this as well. But as far as DeSantis and Abbott are concerned, they are 100% innocent. They are doing what they need to do to ensure that these people have a good life in the United States by sending them to one of the nicest, most comfortable places to live, depending on the season, of course, in this country.
So there are a couple of considerations as well, given the multi-state nature of this particular action. There are provisions, constitutional provisions, that have to do with transiting across state lines, and that would suggest that it could be problematic for states to force people out of their states and to other states, and that could be implicated as well. But in terms of sort of who is on the hook, in terms of possible constitutional violations of the civil rights of migrants, in this instance, in the Martha's Vineyard instance, it's really the state of Florida that took people into custody and transported them, quite likely without their authorization, without meaningful consent, and therefore I would put the state of Florida on the hook for this one.
In NPR's reporting, migrants were told they were going to Boston where they would be able to get a job and other necessities. California's Governor Gavin Newsom says these migrants were transported under false pretense.
Oh, Gavin Newsom says. Oh, well, Gavin Newsom says it. It must be true. I mean, it's that guy's just a bastion of awesomeness. He never tells a lie. He never does anything wrong, ever.
Absolutely. And I think it's a key issue. This is a point that we've been making. In those cases where there is true consent, there are a number of other moral and political issues, but the legal issues are less significant. But here, where it does appear that there is a lack of consent, in other words, government authorities essentially coerced people into taking these buses, and therefore government authorities essentially took people into government custody without any consent and also without any authorization.
Yeah, like I said, these woke lawyers are just brilliant. I mean, she says right there, government took people into custody without their consent. What are the police, if not an arm of the government to take me into custody without my consent? Now, she did add on, without authority. It's like, I think that Gavin Newsom has the authority to move criminals. These are criminals. They crossed the border illegally. They are criminals. So, idiots.
You do get into serious issues of whether this is essentially a false arrest or even kidnapping that would be problematic under the law, certainly under civil rights provisions.
Rachel Self, a Boston attorney who specializes in immigration law, said in remarks that were posted on social media that the migrants were instructed to change their addresses with immigration authorities when they relocated. Can you tell us, why does this matter?
Well, it's a very significant issue because all of these migrants, these families, children, parents who are seeking protection in the United States have already been processed by immigration authorities at the border. Most of them are asylum seekers. They're seeking that protection under the law. So they have ongoing immigration proceedings in their cases.
Poverty is not a reason to seek asylum. And we see that most of these people coming here are trying to get out of poverty. You cannot claim asylum if you live in a poor country just because you are poor.
But all of the paperwork that would have been filled out by the immigration authorities would have an address that is nothing like the one that they now have, now that they've been transported to an area that is not at all where they intended to go. And unfortunately, it's not so easy to make an address change either.
Oh, it's not easy. It's not easy, really? Now, maybe she's specifically talking about for illegal immigrants, because for me, I go onto the internet and I go to the U.S. Post Office site and I type in my old address and I type in my new address. And I'm done. And if I didn't have the internet, all I have to do is go down to the post office, which literally is in walking distance from where I live. I am not joking. It's what? If I could walk as the crow flies, it's less than 2 blocks away. But I have to walk around a school, so it's like 3 blocks. And I fill out a little form with my address. And guess what that form has? It has Spanish. And I'm betting you if you go to the U.S. Post Office site, you can click on Spanish and have the entire site be in Spanish for the people who come here who refuse to learn English.
And so it is quite likely that they will not receive notice of their hearings or any updates in relation to their immigration cases. And if they do want to pursue their immigration cases in a new location very different from where they intended to go, they'll have to file motions with the immigration court. This is not something that is automatic or that is easy to do, especially without a lawyer.
They do not want to follow up on their cases because most likely they will be found to be ineligible for asylum, and then they will be shipped out of the country. They do not want to do this. So you're basically complaining about something that's not going to be an issue for these people.
And so we fear that there will be very significant due process violations for many of these asylum seekers.
Where does this go from here? What is the next step here?
So, I mean, legally, the facts are still not completely clear, so there will need to be further investigation. But I expect that there will be legal challenges to both the busing that Arizona and Texas have engaged in, as well as this latest effort by the governor of Florida. I also expect that the Department of Justice may be looking at this because there are civil rights implications that the Department of Justice can be considering, as well as preemption concerns, because the law is clear that it is the federal government that should be engaged in immigration enforcement, immigration processing. And here you're seeing state actors getting involved in very complicated ways in this process.
Well, what about my civil rights? These people are coming here and violating my civil rights. Oh, but that's okay because I'm a U.S. citizen born and raised, and I'm white, so it's fine. You can violate my civil rights all you want to. Furthermore, the federal government is not doing their job in securing the border or taking care of these illegal immigrants. Somebody has to step up to the plate and do that job for them, obviously, since the federal government apparently is too incompetent to do it. Funny how they weren't incompetent under Trump.
That's Denise Gilliman, co-director of the Immigration Clinic at the University of Texas School of Law. Denise Gilliman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
Ryan DeSantis? It's Ron DeSantis, stupid.
Has been unmoved by the criticism that the flights of migrants he sent to Martha's Vineyard were inhumane and a political stunt. He says Florida plans to continue with a program that will send planes and buses of migrants to places he identifies as sanctuary jurisdictions.
Yes, it's perfectly fine for him to send these people to sanctuary jurisdictions. Why wouldn't it be? They are sanctuary jurisdictions. Florida is not. Furthermore, it's inhumane to send them there. I mean, they walked through the desert under deadly conditions. These young girls that are sent alone, their parents send them alone, are repeatedly violated by the coyotes and the cartels. Repeatedly. Not just once. No, it doesn't happen just once. It happens to them multiple times. But that's okay because it's for a better life. Yeah, never mind the fact that you are now, destroyed your soul because you allowed yourself to be subjected to these vile, disgusting people.
NPR's Greg Allen has been covering the governor's actions from Miami, and he's with us now to tell us more. Greg, thanks so much for being here.
Sure, Michelle.
So could you just remind us why Governor DeSantis wanted to send these flights to Martha's Vineyard specifically?
Well, for months, DeSantis has railed against President Biden's immigration policies at nearly every event he holds, and he holds them almost every day. He thinks Biden hasn't done enough to stop the record flow of migrants coming over the southern border.
You didn't just say that, did you? I mean, seriously, you just said Biden hasn't done enough to stop the record flow of migrants over the southern border. Really? You don't see any problem with that statement at all. Not to mention, Biden didn't do anything to stop this, other than eventually he said, we have to start rebuilding this part of the wall. And that's it. He hasn't sent any of these people back. He hasn't shut down the border. He hasn't sent in troops. We should have military on the border at this point.
And so he's been talking about sending them to places like Martha's Vineyard. We first heard him mention Martha's Vineyard last December. And, he was educated at Harvard and Yale himself, but he sees...
Oh, that means he's evil. I mean, just because he went to Harvard and Yale, that's it. He's 100% on the side of the bad people now. Maybe going to those places gave him the perspective he needed to go, look, something has to change in this country.
That area, that island, as a bastion of what he calls liberal elites, why he singled it out. And DeSantis is positioning himself, of course, for a possible run for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. And so an indication of what's going on here is that the video of the migrants arriving in Martha's Vineyard was first supplied and shown on Fox News. We don't know who supplied it, but the suspicion is that it was done by a videographer hired by the governor's staff.
And so one assumes that this is considered to play well with people who he thinks are his base, I guess.
Right, if he could, exactly. Looking for the MAGA vote.
So what's the political thinking behind the decision to move migrants from Texas and not his own state?
Right. It's very interesting because, Florida has not received the record numbers of migrants seen at the Texas border. But we do get migrants here. But the ones who come here without visas are people who arrive by boat, usually from somewhere in the Caribbean. And busing migrants out of Florida has become a very touchy issue politically. Recently, DeSantis' lieutenant governor was forced to walk back comments she made. She was talking about, we'll bus people out of Florida who don't have documents. And people said, do you mean Cubans? And so she was talking about sending them to Delaware. And then she had to backtrack from that. And later, DeSantis also emphasized they didn't mean Cubans, who are Cuban Americans are an important Republican voting bloc in South Florida and one of the largest migrant groups here. So instead, DeSantis says the state is going to go to Texas to intercept migrants there who might be headed to Florida. And he says the state's working with contractors there to, in his words, profile migrants that might be headed to Florida, and then we will send them elsewhere, is his thoughts. And he says more flights are coming.
The legislature gave me $12 million. We're going to spend every penny of that to make sure that we're protecting the people of the state of Florida.
The protection that DeSantis is talking about is mostly about avoiding the costs of accommodating migrants who are awaiting immigration proceedings, like the group that he sent to Martha's Vineyard.
Oh, no, heaven forfend. The governor of a state doesn't want to spend the hard-earned tax dollars of the citizens of the state on bullcrap like allowing illegal immigrants to stay in the state. Oh, no. Boo-hoo, I am crying a river.
Okay, Greg, but the nearly 50 people that Florida put on flights are mostly Venezuelan. They fled a country under the control of Nicolas Maduro, who many Americans see as a dictator. They are likely to make an asylum claim. Florida has a history of accommodating Cubans. So how do people see this here when people are also fleeing a left-wing dictatorship?
Right. Well, South Florida is home to the nation's largest Venezuelan population, and many of those who are citizens have supported DeSantis and other Republicans in the past, in part because of the Republican anti-socialist campaign rhetoric. DeSantis' action targeting Venezuelans came as a shock to many here. They've been amazed that the Republicans who've supported them in getting rid of Maduro wouldn't help the people who are actually penalized by them. And so there's questions about this, how this might affect them going down the road here.
That is NPR's Greg Allen in Miami. Greg, thank you.
And what happened to the migrants after they deplaned in Martha's Vineyard? They stayed in Martha's Vineyard, one of the nicest places in the country, depending on the season, for a whopping 44 hours before the people living in Martha's Vineyard shipped them off to the mainland because, we don't have the facilities to accommodate them here. You don't really? Are you sure? Are you sure you don't have lots and lots of mansions you could just stick these people into? No, they have to go to the mainland where they can be better accommodated in poverty conditions. Yeah, this is an eye-opening experience. And I know that the progressives out there are just going like, well, it's not right. It's a human rights violation to send these people to Martha's Vineyards. Hopefully, at least a few of them have had their eyes open to what is really happening here. And what do we have here provided by the office of Ron Desantis, but one of the consent forms signed and dated by one of the illegal immigrants. It is written in English at the top here and then written in Spanish at the bottom here. I do not speak Spanish. You can read the English if you want to. It basically says that you agree to be transported from Texas to Massachusetts, signed and dated on September 13th, 2022. And if you're wondering why the 13 comes before the 9, most countries in the world put the day first when they're writing out the date. The United States puts the month first. So yeah, this person is an adult. They were born in 1988. They can make those sorts of decisions for themselves. Furthermore, I live here not in a great neighborhood in Southern California. My neighbors are all not white. But you go to Marthas Vineyard, which is, 92% white or something? Oh, as soon as 50 non-whites show up, we got to ship them out. Obviously, it's not about race for me. I'm living here in a neighborhood where I'm one of the only white people. It's not about race for me. So it's about race for somebody. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Make sure that you're still subscribed. I'll see you in the next video.